Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to do a short video today because inspiration struck, and I wanted to talk about how astrology can actually help you become more intelligent and get you on the road to being hyper intelligent. So astrology is often thought of as this sort of stupid study. Like if you like astrology, you're thick. It's often quite misogynistic as well because people assume that if you're a woman and you like horoscopes, it's a girly thing where I don't want to date a Gemini, and that's really not what astrology is. And most of our famous philosophers like Aristotle, Plato were actually astrologers. Also Nostradamus was a very famous astrologer. So, this is not a thing where like, oh, if you're an astrologer, you're stupid. These were very intelligent philosophers. So, how can astrology actually teach you to be more intelligent? Well, the first thing, and I also want to say this as someone who would consider themselves to be intelligent. That's not an arrogant thing for me to say. I have a PhD, I'm academically very intelligent. I have spent most of my life in an environment which teaches others how to be intelligent. I've taught at universities myself, and I have pretty much always associated myself with learning and teaching. So I think I'm somebody that is sort of uniquely positioned to say, this is how it works. So the first thing is actually recognizing patterns. So a lot of geniuses have pattern recognition as their sort of number one thing that makes them intelligent. So pattern recognition is being able to look at one thing, like a data set, and understanding what it has in common with another data set. So having more information in your brain does not make you smart, it doesn't make you more intelligent. Just because you know more, or maybe you have more general trivia in your mind, does not make you intelligent. I had this conversation a while back with my dad, who is like, oh, he's not very good at general trivia, but he's so freaking smart. Like sometimes he'll talk to me about things and I'm just bewildered by how good he is, because he's like more mechanical, more logical, the way he can understand how parts work. I'm like, what? Because I'm very philosophical. So sometimes people will think, oh, I'm not that smart because I don't know how to pass a pub quiz. That's not what intelligence is. It's being able to make the link between two different things. So this transit can mean this, and then you collect that and understand it. So don't think that you're not intelligent because you're someone who doesn't have a lot of information in your brain, or maybe you can't take on a lot of information. If you're somebody who knows how to notice what data has in common, you're probably intelligent, and that is something that astrology can teach you. The second thing is that it makes you a wonderful problem solver. So let's say we have a birth chart and someone comes to me and they say, Abigail, I have this problem. I really don't know what's going on. I have this health problem. Can you have a look for me? Okay, first thing I do is I look at like an X-ray. So first off, I know there's a problem. If there's a problem, there's got to be something that's causing the problem. So I go around the wheel and say, what's causing the problem? Well, I also know that because of my pattern recognition, I'm going to be looking at the 6th house of physical health. I might also be saying, okay, when was the last time you had an issue like this? Is this new? Is this reoccurring? Okay, what's the pattern here? So that teaches you to solve a problem, okay, because you're kind of looking for a diagnosis. So when you have the diagnosis, we then need to solve the problem. And you're able to build solutions from there. It's also really good because you do not accept what everyone tells you, right? So someone would say, oh, well, it's probably just because, you're not eating properly, or etc., etc. Well, you might say, well, Abigail, I have been eating properly. I'm doing everything right. What's the problem? So it's really good to get you to be a problem solver. And obviously that's the number one thing that a lot of intelligent people do. And this is why people have large salaries, they work in senior leadership, are at their very core problem solvers. The third thing is that you get very comfortable with accepting what is right and what is wrong. So astrology teaches you to be more intelligent because you sometimes have to accept that you are wrong. And this is something that is, hard, right? Nobody wants to be wrong, but actually intelligent people don't get defensive when they're wrong. Instead, they try to find another way of understanding the problem. So you have to kind of abandon your belief system a little bit. You say, okay, I was wrong, but maybe I need to look at it from a different way. Maybe I need to say my hypothesis was wrong, so maybe I need to calibrate the hypothesis. So you might not even say that you're point blank wrong, but instead you say, okay, well, let's try and fix the problem. Let's try and see what it is, rather than saying, well, actually you're wrong. And, maybe blah, 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 and sort of trying to get defensive. It's normal to get defensive, but if you are intelligent, then you'll understand that better evidence will probably arrive at another point if you keep searching for it. The fourth thing is that you become very good at interpreting meaning. So this is sometimes a talent and it's something that can be developed. Personally, for me, I've always had it as a talent. From a very, very young age, I was good at interpreting meaning. Every time I had a job interview and someone said, what's your greatest strength? I'd say immediately, I'm very analytical. Not in a sort of, I'm ruled by Mercury, I'm a Virgo, I'm a Gemini. I was like, I'm super analytical. I can tell you the meaning from anything. I can look at a rock and tell you what that might mean for you philosophically throughout life. And that's because I have that as a very poetic person. You can develop that skill, but in astrology, you have to interpret meaning. And this is because if you want to be truly original and you want to be intelligent, you have to put your own thoughts across. So we have foundational books, traditional astrology from Mesopotamian times that really gave us the foundations to learn from. But if you truly want to be original and you want to be intelligent, you have to come up with your own analogies, your own interpretation. You have to be okay standing up and saying, I don't agree with this astrologer, because from my experience, from my pattern recognition and my data collection, that hasn't been the case. So you can look at a chart and say on the surface level, this is what's happening, but the true intelligence comes from interpreting meaning and going really deep and saying, actually, this solution, it's not very obvious. And the final thing, and this is probably the most important, is that you are then able to translate this incredibly complex concept into something very simple for the masses. So for people who only know their sun sign, they're going to be really confused when you're talking about Saturn and Juno and conjunct and sextile and all this kind of stuff. You're like, you're speaking a different language. You could be speaking Italiano for all I know, right? So this is, again, something that some people can do really well. It's something that you can develop. For me, again, it's something that I was able to do naturally as an academic because I had to teach 19-year-olds what an oligopoly was. Like, in a business context, what does this mean? And these are people who didn't have any prior business knowledge because they came from entertainment background, right? They're like film study students. So then you try to say, this is very complex. How can you teach it in a very simple way? So I would do things like, okay, well, can you see these 5 major supermarkets that we have in the UK where they operate as an oligopoly, right? Or maybe Samsung and Apple, you can see how these are not monopolies because they compete with each other. So using very simple things that we might see or use on the day-to-day and making it a simple concept. So with astrology, it is a very difficult language. You know, more than anything, astrology is a language, right? It has to be interpreted, it has to be understood and translated. So trying to make that very simple is quite difficult, and that makes you more intelligent because you yourself can start questioning it and saying, okay, when I simplify it, that's not actually what it means. And I've always said it's extremely easy to be complex. It's super, super hard to be simple in no matter what walk of life, right? So those are 5 major things. Obviously there's a lot more, but also philosophically, you really are able to challenge the status quo. So what everyone says is not what you accept. And it's interesting because you can link astrology to lots of different things, astrology and business. How does astrology work with a major acquisition of a company, right? Or entertainment, someone's personal life, you know? And it's interesting because you start questioning other things. Why is astrology being villainized so much? The days of the week are actually named that way because of astrology, right? So how is it that when you go to these beautiful Romanesque type of places in Europe, like Italy, for example, it really had its roots in astrology. But now that people are like, oh no, astrology is stupid, or is she a green flag or a red flag because she likes horoscopes and blah, blah, blah. And it's also like, you know what I mean? Like, if they actually understood how astrology can make you more intelligent, they'd be using it. I say this to someone else, like not in a mocking way, but like, you know, those podcast bros that are like, yeah, to maximize and optimize your life. When they start getting onto astrology and acting like they took it on, you'll be like, oh, this is so funny. So for me, I think there's so many ways that astrology can make you more intelligent. So let me know down below if there's anything you think I've missed that's major, or is there anything you've been like, I've been learning astrology and I feel like this has really helped me, or this has helped me develop a specific talent. Because again, all these things I've mentioned can be used for your career, for your relationships, and ultimately can make you a better person too.